Definers, welcome to episode 85, our traditional Holiday Hodge Podge, the last one that Jay and I are going to do.
Man.
We'll see if the new people do it. Maybe they'll come up with something else. I don't think they can beat the name, though, Hodgepodge.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, Jay, tell them what we're going to tell them.
Man, Scott, for the final time, Definers, here's what this episode's going to look like. First, we're going to start with our podcast year in review. We'll touch on some of our personal updates over the course of 2024. We will share our favorite articles from this year, as well as our favorite podcast episodes from this year. Then, of course, we will share our sustainable gift ideas as we enter this holiday season, and then finally wrap it up with our round of thanks. So, Scott, let's get this party started. Tell us about this podcast year in review.
Okay, well, we got close to 700,000 total downloads since we began. Is that actually the number? I think so. I hope Libsyn is telling us the truth, but whatever. It's a lot. And I'm more confident in this number, the more recent download numbers, about 5,000 per month. That's amazing. We appreciate everyone sticking with us, especially with some non-traditional episodes as of late, as Jay and I are doing some other things and looking for the next hosts, but appreciate everyone sticking with us, and there will be some new content in the new year for sure. But our most popular episode of this year was our March episode. That was episode 80, Carbon Removal with Ben Rubin from the Carbon Business Council.
For good reason. That was a great episode.
Yeah.
We have also, via the podcast, continued to make global impact. There were 5 countries where we had over 1,000 downloads. The U.S., which is probably not too much of a surprise for us, but then also the U.K., Canada, Australia, and Germany. So, Scott, our voices are being heard on either side of each ocean that we're bordered by.
I'm kicking myself, Jay, because I went to Montreal a couple months ago, London last month. I should have posted on Instagram, I'm here. Who wants to meet up?
Scott, I did do that a few years ago when I was gallivanting Europe talking to folks, and it was really cool.
I forget, you posted on our social, and then someone said, hey, I'll meet up with you?
Yeah, I think we even said it on one of our episodes, if I recall. Man, this is a good while ago. But yeah, I was able to meet up with a handful of folks. It was awesome.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So that's the podcast's year. Scott, let's talk about your year. Fill us in.
Okay. Well, it's my turn to say in the Hodgepodge that I got married.
Woohoo!
Yes. Beautiful and lovely wedding in Annapolis with the ceremony at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's headquarters. Highly recommend it to anyone looking to get married in that part of the country. Sorry, Jay and Anna couldn't make it. Oh,
I know, Scott. I was just laughing. That was right when Wally was being born, and
I know
the funniest thing happened. A week after he came out, he looked at me and was like, "You could have gone. I wouldn't have taken offense." And I've just been kicking myself ever since.
I know. Well, it's okay. We love Wally. So everything was composted, no plastic, lots of cans, of course, composting toilets.
Nice.
That definitely generated some questions. My mom also diligently composted everything at the engagement party she kindly threw for us at her home. So that was awesome. Shout out to Mom.
Mm-hmm.
Also want to talk flowers. So Shannon loves flowers. We didn't do the paper flowers thing or have no flowers, but we did use someone who does a lot of scavenging. And she only uses flowers within 50 miles of where she's based. So that was cool. And Shannon also did a DIY dried flowers thing. I don't know, Jay, if you guys did that sort of thing, but it's actually really expensive to do it professionally. It's $400 or $500.
We did not look into that.
But I was thinking, hey, this is a way for the flowers to keep bringing us joy. So I'm really appreciative that she did that.
Love it.
And we tried to make it a sustainable celebration of our love. But it was difficult. Those getting married and wanting additional ideas than what I mentioned, check out our sustainable weddings episode.
Yeah.
So hopefully you all also enjoyed the sustainable jewelry episode that talks about where we got our wedding bands. Mia Donna certainly does it. A fantastic job of trying to be a sustainable jewelry company, particularly with just selling lab-grown diamonds. And now we're off to our honeymoon in Vietnam for 3 weeks right after Christmas.
So awesome. And Scott, what's the plan in Vietnam? Some beach time, good food, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's going to have a little bit of everything. And Shannon, I think, has been waiting for us to do the multi-day resort drinks on the beach sort of thing. So
Sure. You're certainly entitled.
yes, so we'll do that. So oftentimes we're too active. We're trying to not just go from place to place this time.
I get that.
Yeah. Okay, and then on the work front at Can Manufacturers Institute, a variety of things to tell listeners about. We were going to trim this, but there's a lot that I'm like, oh, I told them about this last year, and I want to tell them what happened.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so first thing is just that I did do some professional development, and I earned my Certified Association Executive credential from the American Society of Association Executives. I just want to mention this because I think it's so funny. There is an association for associations. That's what the ASAE is. And if there happen to be any association professionals listening that maybe aren't aware of the CAE, I wasn't aware of it until a couple years ago, I wanted to mention it. Who knows?
I love it.
Okay. Also got promoted to Senior Vice President of Sustainability. So thankful every day for the opportunity to do a job that I love and where I'm recognized for good work. I know that's not the case for everybody. So
Great.
in terms of some notable highlights, we did form the Coalition for High Performance Recycling, or CHIPPR, as we call it. You like that, Jay? CHIPPR?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, pleased with it. And so CHIPPR, what we did is we formed this with other organizations that want to see recycling refunds, which is another word for deposit return systems, bottle bills, included in any extended producer responsibility for packaging bills that become law. So remember, these recycling refund programs, they deliver significantly higher recycling rates given the financial incentive to return the container of like 5 or 10 cents. Shorthand for this is that with these programs, you buy the beverage, but you borrow the container. And it consistently delivers upwards of 90% redemption if you have a high enough deposit value and convenient redemption opportunities. So hopefully we'll pass more of those. There's already been 5 EPR, extended producer responsibility for packaging bills passed in the recent years. There hasn't been a new recycling refund bill in a bunch of years, but hopefully we get a joint bill, EPR and recycling refunds, passed very soon. We also launched the U.S. chapter of Every Can Counts to engage people in innovative, effective ways so that they're inspired to recycle their cans. We do this with a social media presence on Facebook and Instagram, so check us out there, but also with on-the-ground activations, since the focus of ECC is away from home recycling. So I talked in the last Holiday Hodge Podge about our Mardi Gras recycling effort called Recycle Dat.
Nice.
And it happened for a second year in 2024, and that is when we launched the U.S. chapter of Every Can Counts. And with the expanded effort in year 2, the cans recycled along the parade route tripled to nearly 150,000 cans. And the total from the activations during the 2 Mardi Gras weekend daytime parades and the doubling of the normal UBC payout, or used beverage can payout, at EMR, the metal recycling facility in New Orleans, was roughly twice that of the previous year at more than 350,000 cans. So that meant that we generated a little over $8,000, which included a doubling from my organization, and $3,270 of those dollars were donated to 3 local charities, which is essentially all the money from the cans collected along the parade route. So pretty cool. Get cans collected that otherwise wouldn't be, and raise money for a charity.
Awesome.
And then also under the ECC umbrella, we launched our Cans for Cash Circularity Center. So I wrote an article a couple years ago about this vast network of Cans for Cash points that used to exist in the 1970s and 1980s in the US. And I've wanted to bring Cans for Cash points back in a modern way. And this does that. And our first circularity center is in Blytheville, Arkansas. We're going to do 4 more across Florida, Illinois, and Mississippi. And essentially, people bring their used beverage cans to this centrally located circularity center that is staffed during normal business hours, and then they get paid a market rate for the cans. And then those cans get recycled. And they get paid by getting an email where they can get the payout via PayPal, digital gift card, or direct deposit into a bank. And we track the cans recycled via an online impact report. So I think it's pretty cool, Jay. We only go to places with no or low recycling access with this.
Great.
And then last year, I talked about the launch of our Million Cans Recycling Contest. So we had 8 schools in 7 states involved with this. Kind of a similar model here where the schools collect a whole bunch of cans. They partner with a local scrapyard, sell it for cash, and then the kids get educated about recycling, but it also raises money for the schools. So these 8 schools, 2023 to 2024 school year, they actually did it. They collected 1.3 million cans over the course of the school year.
Incredible.
And now we're doing it bigger and better. We've got the 2 million cans recycling contest going now with 18 schools.
Awesome.
I don't think there's any in Colorado, Jay, near you, but, we try.
Keep trying.
All right. And then I've also talked about our efforts to capture missorted cans at material recovery facilities, or MRFs. These are places where they sort single-stream recyclables. So a cool new thing this year is a revenue share model where we fund the equipment and then get a revenue share from the cans captured with the equipment. So we funded 2 robots on what's called the last chance line. This is the stuff that's sorted that goes to landfill at 2 MRFs with a 50% revenue share. The one at the Lakeshore Recycling Systems MRF in Chicago, we recently got a lot of press about it. In Trellis, which is the new name for GreenBiz, and Packaging World. I'll link to the articles in our show notes online, but you can just Google that. And it's great that the relatively high value of used beverage cans enable this sort of model where the packaging pays for its own cost of recycling. Some other quick things. Also spearheaded our 2024 Global Aluminum Can Sustainability Summit in London, one of the 150 senior leaders across the aluminum beverage can value chain. And we continued our focus on decarbonization and recycled content measurement, but also added in greenwashing and standardized sustainability data reporting. All right, so that's some things for this year. What's coming up next year? I'll still be focused at CMI on recycling refunds advocacy, enhancing that every can counts work, doing more revenue share financing for can capture equipment. I'll also continue my work as the chair of the Recycling Partnerships Board of Directors. I've been on the board for a couple years, became the chair middle of this year. And for those of you not familiar, the Recycling Partnership, it works with communities, companies, and policymakers in the United States to help advance the entire recycling industry. It's a 100-person staff, multi-million-dollar organization, so it's a big job, but does a lot of great work.
Awesome, Scott.
So that's it.
Hell of a year.
Jay, what do you got?
Scott, I think biggest thing for me is that I became a dad, right? So
Yeah.
Anna and I welcomed our son Wally on August 21st, which again was, just a little too close for comfort to your and Shannon's wedding, which was tough, but
Yeah, August 24th.
yes.
Way too
So
close.
we sense our love and our wishes from afar. But I'm really lucky to say that Anna and Wally are healthy and doing well. So it's really honestly been nice over the course of even just the back half of this year and leading up to Wally's birth to just really focus in on my personal life with Anna.
Mm-hmm.
Just, super special for both of us to have him in our lives now, getting to spend quality time with Anna and Wally, of course, and then also with our family and friends who've gotten to meet him thus far. And Scott, I know you and Shannon haven't yet, but we're going to try to change that as soon as we're able.
Yeah, and Shannon hasn't been to Colorado, so it's like one of her states
Okay.
to get to 50.
Okay. Oh,
So multiple reasons.
how far along is she towards 50?
I think she's got like 43.
Holy cow. So what's lingering out there?
I don't remember. But Jay, I have a question for you about being a dad.
Yes.
Do you have advice yet to listeners on sustainable taking care of babies? Have you come across anything where you're like, I do this now, and it actually helps me reduce my impact somewhat on this whole baby thing?
That's a great question, Scott. And I feel like the first number of weeks with the kid are like, it's just like all hands on deck. Like there's no rhyme or reason or overall strategy. It's just like man the fort. I think the biggest thing we've been looking out for is just trying to get as much reuse out of stuff we buy or the stuff that we're given as possible. So
Sure.
It's really been nice. Like we've bought some new clothes for Wally, but between, some of our friends, like we're just, everyone has just been super willing to dump off their old stuff. So like,
Yeah.
We'll get onesies and play stuff. So that's really nice. And then, as far as kind of longevity goes, because I think Anna and I are thinking about multiple kids, we're investing in, glass bottles for him to eat out of that we'll be able to use for the foreseeable future. So I don't know. That's probably maybe a good, follow-up article or something down the road. But I guess I'm still Scott, just getting used to the lack of sleep that I can't necessarily put together any other good conclusions yet.
Yeah, lack of sleep. Okay, but reuse secondhand stuff. And then I've heard one of the most frustrating things is just like the food waste.
Yeah, well, and that's, Wally's not eating Oreos and Doritos yet. He's
Too much
still on
anyway.
his milk
Yeah.
diet. So we haven't gotten there yet. But yes, I'm sure that's a hurdle coming up.
Fair enough.
I'd be remiss if I didn't Also mentioned in my personal update, Scott, that Michigan won the national championship in college football, which was a big deal. Not going to repeat this year, but we're just leaving the door open for the Hoosiers, right?
I hope so. I mean, this loss to Ohio State was pretty deflating, but we'll see. It's nice to be in the conversation for once.
Totally. And let's see, on the work side, again, I'm at Equity Residential. We talked about some of this stuff actually earlier this year, Scott, but I focus on providing capital for and managing multifamily developments in Colorado and Texas. So 2024 was a tough year to start new projects. You had a lot of interest rate uncertainties, political, geopolitical tensions. So it was tough to start new projects this year. So we're hopeful that we can start new ones next year. But that did mean that this year we were focused on the construction completion of 5 projects, 3 in Dallas, 2 in Denver. And so once they're done, A, it's really cool just to see them come to form, and B, to have folks start moving in and occupying them, which is really cool. So that's been really fun. And of course, on the work side, it was also really fun to spotlight Becky Becker and the work that she does in resiliency for the EQR portfolio. I'm realizing we call Equity Residential shorthand EQR. We'll touch on that episode a little bit later on in this hodgepodge here, but that was also really fun.
Yeah, and I feel like even in the presidential campaign, there was a lot of talk about housing shortages. So hopefully President Trump does something on that front, and it makes it easier for you and others to build the housing people need.
I think you're spot on, Scott.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move into the next section here. Favorite articles. First one I have is on reality check on climate progress. So the UN Environment Program released a report in October 2024 titled Emissions Gap Report 2024, No More Hot Air, Please. I love that title.
Yeah, it's great.
Like, it works on several fronts. It's beautiful. It's like something we would write.
I didn't tell you, Scott. I had submitted that for consideration.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay, so the reality is we're not on track for a 1.5 degree pathway or even a 2 degree pathway. For one, CO2 equivalent emissions in 2023 reached a new record, growing 1.3% versus 2022. So not the trajectory we want. Also, if there's a failure to increase ambition in the nationally determined contributions or NDCs that will be announced next year, that would mean we're on course for an increase of 2.6 to 3.1 degrees. That's not below 2 or even below 1.5, of course. The 2.6 degree scenario is based on the full implementation of current unconditional and conditional NDCs, and we're not seeing these be fully implemented. NDCs are what countries said this is what we're going to commit to do as part of meeting what was agreed to as part of the Paris Climate Accord. So what would it take to get to the 1.5 degree or the 2 degree pathway? Well, with the 1.5 goal, nations have to collectively commit to cut 42% of annual greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And again, 2023 to 2022, we rose 1.3%, okay? And we have to cut it by 57% by 2035. For the 2 degree pathway, emissions have to fall 28% by 2030 and 37% from 2019 levels by 2035. The year 2035 is the new milestone year to be included in those next round of NDCs. So maybe a bit more feasible to get to the 2 degree pathway, but man, every little bit matters, and it just means more extreme effects of climate change. So, okay, that's how we could get there, but how much would it cost? Well, this report said a minimum 6-fold increase in mitigation investment is needed for net zero. The estimated incremental investment for net zero is $0.9 to $2.1 trillion per year from 2021 to 2050. Investments that would bring returns and avoided costs from climate change, air pollution, damage to nature, and human health impacts. And for context, the global economy and financial markets are worth $110 trillion per year. But Jay, I don't know if you saw the news out of Baku with the COP conference that just completed.
Go on.
Where the agreement was that developed nations would voluntarily contribute $300 billion per year by 2035. That is a far cry from this 0.9 to 2.1 trillion per year for net zero.
Yes, it certainly is.
Okay, so the next NDCs, particularly from the G20 countries minus the African Union that represent 77% of emissions, that is something to watch. We need rapid action with those NDCs, not only the ambitions within them, but actually action to achieve them. So at COP in Brazil next year, let's see what these NDCs look like.
Sounds good.
All right, so the second article for everybody. Aquaculture surpassed capture fisheries in aquatic animal production. So basically, aquaculture produced more fish for people to eat than captured fisheries. This has not happened before. And this aquaculture stat, it comes from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's 2024 edition of the State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture. And 10 countries, China, Indonesia, India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Philippines, South Korea, Norway, Egypt, and Chile, dominate production, producing over 90% of the total in 2022. And of total aquatic animal production, 89% was used for direct human consumption. So that underscores the critical role of fisheries and aquaculture in maintaining global food security. Interestingly, U.S. not on that list. Okay, so looking at fish caught in the wild, the fraction of marine fishery stocks within biologically sustainable levels unfortunately continued to decline, falling to 62.3% in 2021. That's 2.3% lower than in 2019, although wide variation was reported across the 15 Food and Agriculture Organization major fishing areas monitored. If you're interested in this whole sustainable aquaculture thing, we did do a whole episode on it, episode 45, but I just thought that was so interesting that aquaculture has surpassed capture fisheries now.
Totally. A huge turning point.
Yeah. Okay, so climate budgeting. This is the last article I want to mention. So this is when governments consider the effect of their spending on emissions. And New York City earlier this year became the first major U.S. city to adopt climate budgeting. So going forward, the city will forecast future emissions trajectories, something it hasn't historically done, and apply a specialized method for determining whether capital projects are in line with the city's goals. Broadly, the climate budgeting plan is meant to ensure the city makes the kinds of long-term investments that often get ignored when budget writers plan their spending. And the approach supports the City of New York's target of cutting its carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. Now, most of the city's emissions, Jay, you won't be surprised by this, come from its buildings, followed by transportation, then waste. Current policies have New York on a course to cut its emissions by 54% by 2030 and 74% by 2050. That is in line with some of the emissions reductions we were talking about a little bit ago.
Yep.
Now, Mayor Adams's 2025 budget, the first that used climate budgeting, made certain allocations as a result of this exercise. They included $4 million and 36 full-time staffers to enforce a new mandate that requires building owners to reduce their carbon emissions, and $85 million in additional funding to turn the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal into an offshore wind hub. Now, other cities that use climate budgeting are Barcelona, Berlin, London, Milan, Montreal, Mumbai, Oslo, Stockholm, Paris, Rio. What's this? Tish Wayne. Where's Tish Wayne, Jay? Do you know?
Oh, boy. I can see how fast I Google it.
Oh, South Africa.
Nice.
I guess you didn't go there when you were there.
I did not go there. That is correct.
So we'll see if other U.S. cities follow New York City. But this whole climate budgeting thing, I hadn't heard of it before reading this article. So,
very cool.
Okay, Jay, turn it to you.
Okay. Well, I went to ChatGPT and I was like, what are some interesting articles for this year? And no, I'm kidding. But I did want to find...
That's okay if you did.
I did, though. I mean, Scott, our company's talking a lot about AI. AI is talked about everywhere. So I wanted to see... And the wrap on it is that it consumes so much electricity, so much water, etc. So,
yeah.
One of my favorites came from the Wall Street Journal this year, entitled How to Cut AI's Appetite for Electricity and Water. So this is one of the most interesting stats I thought I found from this article, which was for every 10 to 50 responses, ChatGPT consumes the equivalent of one 16.9 ounce bottle of water. And so you have to ask yourself, there's a range of different types of questions you can ask AI. Something super complicated all the way down to like, what's the weather going to be today? If it can actually answer that. And so it doesn't matter what the question is, you're burning water, right? So there are interesting background happenings behind just the interface you see. So this article starts to delve into those. So This was inspiring as this article highlighted the potential methods to curb AI's power hungriness. So the author, Bart Ziegler, highlights 7 strategies, and I just bulleted down my favorite 3. So number 1 is using different sources for water. So water is used to cool these big data CPU farms to power AI. So they're looking at different sources of water to use instead of the municipal sources of water that are commonly used, which seems like kind of a real waste. One of the options proposed in the article is using treated wastewater, which to me sounds like a much less resource intensive way to do it. So you're not competing for water that could be consumed by Wally. I don't know. Number 2 was smarter training for AI with more curated harvesting sources. So I think when these companies train these AI models, the amount of data that they feed them is just enormous. And Bart Ziegler is saying there's probably a better way to achieve the same result as far as training these models with a smaller data set that doesn't consume as much power as they do. The third favorite of mine was to actually show users AI's impact, kind of like what I just talked about. Like, oh, Jay, your question about the weather just burned, a cup of water, whatever that might be. So this would be similar to the way if folks are looking for flights, Scott, as you and Shannon were booking your flights to Vietnam, if you use Google, it tells you how many carbon emissions your flight would produce. This would do something similar. So just starting to tap into that interesting kind of psychological relationship with you, the AI user.
So all very interesting. I hadn't heard that bottle of water stat for the 10 to 50 responses. So that's a nice shorthand. I will say one thing. I don't know if the Bart Ziegler touched on this, but one thing that kind of annoys me is that, like, when I search on Google, it defaults to doing an AI search.
Yes.
I'm like, I don't need that. And like, to give you kind of like a crazy example, my work computer, it does this thing now where like the colon and semicolon button does not work.
Okay.
So I have to Google colon symbol and then copy and paste it. And every time I've done colon symbol as a Google search, it does the AI search. And I'm like, no, I just need the thing to copy paste. I don't need you to do this thing. It's so silly.
That is actually really funny. But also unfortunate.
Yeah.
Okay, my second favorite article from this year was called New Tech Tries to Catastrophe-Proof Your Home by Christopher Mims, also in the Wall Street Journal. You can tell what I've been reading most of this year.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a pair of nice co-benefits, or Scott, as we look back over the years, we always like to call these win-wins, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, turns out what's good for your home from an environmental standpoint can also help insulate it from severe weather events. So, the article highlights a home in nearby Boulder, Colorado, that, unlike its immediate neighbors, made it through the devastating 2021 Marshall Fire mostly unscathed, which I think many folks point to as the most destructive wildfire in Colorado's history, probably by dollar value, but just huge. The energy efficient upgrades that this owner had made to make it airtight sealed it against embers that ignited some of his neighbors' homes from the inside and from smoke that inundated many of his other neighbors. Now, this home had also pivoted entirely to electric energy over gas, which allowed his home to be powered much more quickly than his neighbors, as they had to wait until their gas was turned back on. So those were cool examples from this guy's house outside Boulder. Insulation generally plays a role too when you're catastrophe-proofing your home. So new insulation technologies that are making their way to the US can be cheaper, more effective, and easier to use, on top of being more environmentally friendly. These are things like wood fiber, foam made from renewable materials, low-carbon concrete, and a substance called hempcrete, which is a lightweight biodegradable composite of lime and ground-up hemp plants that does not come with the munchies. So, those were my favorite articles over the year, Scott.
I feel like hemp is like a super plant. Like, can't you make like t-shirts out of it too? And just like all this stuff.
It's crazy. I feel like I've seen rope made out of hemp.
Yeah.
It's like super strong. It does seem like one of these super plants. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. Shall we move on to our favorite episodes of this year?
Yes, but just one question, Jay. Have you done what this article describes to your home?
We have not. We moved recently, so we haven't necessarily made a ton of like structural upgrades yet.
Sure.
But we're certainly looking at them, and it was nice to see that. Okay, there's definitely some cash outlay for some of these upgrades, but it can be a win-win in many situations.
Yes, love it. Okay, cool.
All right. So when we step back and think about our favorite episodes from this year, I think I teased this earlier. I would be remiss to say if it was not the episode that I got to do with my colleague Becky at Equity Residential, where we got to talk about what it means to be resilient in the residential real estate sector.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at this problem, it's huge. The World Economic Forum found that by looking at 185 extreme weather events from 2000 to 2019, the global costs associated with climate change are around $2.8 trillion. When accounting for the cost to damage to infrastructure, property, agriculture, and human health. That equates to about $143 billion each year. That helped us set the scene in that episode as far as why this topic is important. And then one of my other favorite stats from that article was that a McKinsey study found that of a diversified equity portfolio, absent mitigating actions, climate risk could reduce real estate annual returns toward the end of the decade by as much as 40%, which is huge.
That's a big old freaking deal for people like you, that sort of decline.
Right. I mean, just by the end of the decade, we're not that far off, right? So it was, some sobering statistics, but certainly helped us fuel our conversation with Becky and Lindsay Bruger of the Urban Land Institute.
What's interesting, though, is that was a study of a diversified portfolio, even if they're off by half, like a 20% decline in your returns. Not good.
It's definitely not good. So underscores the fact that folks looking at whether it's a large real estate portfolio or just simply your house, stuff could happen that's going to really impact you financially, and it's worthwhile to take that initiative and look at it up front.
Sure. Okay. Well, my favorite episode of this year was episode number 83 on avocado sustainability. So, Jay, you really liked the episode with your colleague. I really liked the episode with one of my very good friends, Honor Eldridge, who wrote this book, The Avocado Debate. And there's so much more in her book than we got to in the episode, so definitely consider purchasing it. But a couple fun stats that I want to remind the listeners of that we discussed. One is the stone at the center of the avocado. You may think, oh, that's kind of annoying to have to cut out. What's going on there? Well, the avocado evolved to attract the megafauna weighing over 100 pounds that roamed the earth during the Pleistocene from 2.58 million to 11,700 years ago. Crazy.
Very.
Okay, the U.S. enacted a ban on the import of Mexican avocados in 1914. It wasn't until 2004 that the U.S. Department of Agriculture said, okay, final rule, we're going to allow Mexican avocados to be shipped to all 50 states for all 12 months of the year. It was just this crazy back and forth of shipping to certain places or certain parts of the year. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't only until 2004. I'm just so used to that commercial and getting avocados from Mexico.
Uh-huh.
But,
beautiful.
All right. And then 77% of Mexico's water is used for agricultural purposes. And a lot of this water goes to growing avocados. So, yeah, definitely check out that episode. Lots of interesting tidbits, and just the history that Honor dives into in her book is so interesting.
And if I recall critically, Scott, it is still okay to eat the brown parts of the avocado after they've been exposed to the air. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that is the case. They don't taste quite as good, but I still tend to eat it.
Yeah, it's not worth throwing out, right?
But also, you can just cut off, the tiniest, thinnest layer, and then right beneath it, you're good to go.
Yes,
so
also true.
All right, we did our favorite episodes. We're going to move right along to sustainable gift ideas. So the first one is for the outdoor lover, which I'm guessing every definer is a national parks pass. So maybe this is a bit more focused on our U.S. listeners, but maybe they have something similar in other countries.
Uh-huh.
This national parks pass, what it does is it gives you entrance for free to all the national park units, plus a bunch of recreation areas. So if you need ideas on where to visit first with your park pass, there's an article that we linked to from the Clean Choice team with their favorite national parks, but Lord knows there's a million of those sort of articles out there. I'll say it also makes a fantastic wedding gift. So one of the things we tried to do was to really limit what was on our registry, just put the stuff that we're going to really use for a long period of time. But we also wanted to not just say, give us cash. We wanted to have certain things that people were funding with that cash.
Love it.
And one of them, we said, annual pass. And we got like 6 years worth of money for the Parks passes. So that's pretty cool. Your typical Parks Pass, $80. If you're a senior citizen over 62, it's only $20 for the year, or $80 for the rest of your life. Military's free. So you can buy them online. You can also go to some Park Service locations and buy them there.
Excellent.
You have one, Jay? I have one.
We didn't get one this year, but we had one last year. But I think this is, I feel like we should have had this on every year's Hodgepodge because it is just such an amazing gift, right?
Totally. Or state parks passes. Those too.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let's transition, Scott, from the great outdoors to the kitchen. Our next gift idea is the East Fork Pottery Kitchenware. So this certified B Corp brings long-lasting, functional, and beautiful pottery into your home with pieces handmade in Asheville, North Carolina. The company sells everything for the kitchen like mugs, cups, plates and bowls, serving platters, and even candles that are all handmade. The stoneware coffee mug, for example, looks beautiful, is 100% handmade, and is dishwasher and microwave safe. This community was one that was hit by the devastating Hurricane Helene. Through the end of the year, 5% of all sales from East Fork Pottery will be donated to local grassroots organizations' Hurricane Helene relief work. Check them out at eastfork.com. To give you a sense of price, a unique looking rolling pin is $98. Beautiful pottery plates ranging from $44 to $54, and cups, vessels ranging from $40 to $62. Now, Scott, before we move on, I'm talking about pottery. I'll be not in the best position if I didn't also plug Anna's pottery business called Apripots, Apripots. She also makes 100% handmade stuff that I am, as an unbiased observer, think is the best I've ever seen. So, folks, also check that out if you're interested.
APRI Pots?
Yes, that is it. You can find her on Instagram at Apripots, Apripots.
Okay, so folks should go to the Instagram. There's not like a website per se at the moment.
At this point, that is correct.
Got it. Okay. Well, Anna, so talented.
Always.
And we should say, Jay, well, maybe I guess Anna might pay you back in some way with cookies or whatever, but none of these, no one's giving us any. We just found these online and thought they were cool. So
I appreciate the cookie caveat.
Yeah, which she should do, to be clear.
That's right. I'm going to pass that along as soon as we stop here.
Yeah. Okay. And then for the fashionista, a fanny pack or backpack from TerraThread. So through Gift for Good's partnership with TerraThread, your gift supports Feeding America's campaign to end hunger by helping donating meals to kids and families in need. So these products, they're made in fair trade certified factories using 100% organic cotton canvas grown by smallholder and tribal families in India who primarily depend on rain-fed agriculture. So your gift is going to come with a social impact story card explaining the charitable cause behind the product. TerraThread's mission is to empower farmers, rebuild soil through regenerative organic cotton farming, pay workers fairly, and reduce plastic waste. So there's a range of styles and colors. Many of the bags are customizable. There's lots of other apparel available too, like hats and beanies, but this fanny pack that we've been talking about, that's $39. You go to giftsforgood.com and search for the TerraThread fanny pack and check out their other stuff too.
Love it.
Another fashionista option real quick is a stylish pair of sunglasses from Solo Eyewear. These sunglasses come in a variety of different fashionable styles, made with repurposed wood, bamboo, cellulose, or recycled plastic. Now, with each purchase, Solo helps to restore the vision of someone in need by donating 10% of their profits to their partner nonprofit organizations to fund eye exams, glasses, and cataract surgeries. We're seeing prices on their site from $59 to $99, and you can find them at soloeyewear.com.
Excellent. So, this is actually quite topical for me. Here are some gifts for the kids in your life. So, the first, we have a DIY solar printing kit. You can find this on Etsy. We'll link to it in our show notes. Using items from nature, make realistic prints on paper. So I actually had to look this up. I couldn't necessarily tell what this was doing just from this description here. But here it goes. I'll see if I can add lib where necessary. But add little bits from your favorite gardens, walks, and found objects to create your own meaningful prints with magic sheets of light-sensitive paper. You develop these in sunshine and then fix in water. So basically, Scott, what this is like a blank piece of paper. You can add a flower to it, a rock to it, a piece of grass, and you leave it out in the sun, and basically the sunlight imprints the kind of shadows around those images, so you kind of have this interesting negative of all of the stuff that you put on there. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So this makes a great gift for nature lovers, those that are eco-conscious, perhaps homeschooled, artists, photo devotees, and gardeners. The list goes on. It's also suitable for most ages and creative levels.
Mm-hmm.
These are on sale as of this episode for $8.44. So again, we'll post the link to these in our show notes. And another option for the kids is, I think, Scott, you pronounce this the WeSee.
Sure.
Natural Connections and Discovery game. This game is focused on observation and exploration and helping see the connections between animals, plants, insects, or more for those aged 4 and up. The set features over 200 photo cards with up-close details from nature. To play the game, you must match these cards by pattern, shape, or color to another card in the set and create a montage of connected photos. There are thousands of possible matches, making for a new game each time, and each card features a QR code where you can learn more about what's in the picture. Very cool. In addition, the set comes with an activity book for 14 other creative activities for the kids and big kids in your life to get into. The cost is $34.99. You can find this at shop.weesee, which is OUISI.co.
Okay. Well, this is now, Jay, kind of the unique aspect of this hodgepodge that we're kind of looking back.
Yes.
And let's talk about favorite moments from the show overall. And when I was putting this list together, the first one that came to me, Jay, was when we recorded our very first episode on electric bikes with Amber of Ride in your apartment. And we did it like in person, which we never do now and haven't done for a long time. But that was just so cool to just we just gave it a go.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll always remember us just huddled around my kitchen counter, right?
Right.
Just all plugged in and giving it a go. It was great.
And she like came on her bike and then she's like, yeah, my bike says like it's etched as like the first one ever made or something. Remember? Pretty cool. Okay, and another favorite moment for sure, and this moment happened many times, is we got emails from people saying, I've listened to your show and it inspired me to the point that I changed my life. I changed jobs. I pursued certain degrees. I've adopted certain practices and habits in my life. Mm-hmm. And that I think gave me the most fuel to keep going whenever I was like, is anyone even listening to this, or should we keep going? And when we got emails like that, I was like, yes, even just that one person, big deal.
Totally.
Another favorite for me is episodes where we had a personal connection or we tried something a bit different with the show.
Totally.
We did the feminine hygiene products episode, Jay, with Anna and Shannon, and that was fun to do with them and, just sort of honoring, respecting that, we were not the ones to do that episode alone for sure. Mm-hmm. And then the university sustainability, where we talked to Professor McLean and her students, personal sustainable investing, sustainable wedding, sustainable jewelry, where we got into more detail on what we personally have done in the hopes that we could inspire others to take action. And then I think also the Uproot Project partnership, just learning about all these environmental journalists of color that, we sort of made that commitment around George Floyd and things like that to focus more on stories, BIPOC stories, and I think seeing that, hey, there's the journalists telling the stories too, not just what the stories are about that we should be supporting. And, we tried to double contributions from our listeners. That didn't totally work, but I know we gave some money anyway, of course. And I think taking some episodes from them, which we're going to continue to do, I think until we get the new hosts installed, I think has been really nice.
Absolutely.
And then lastly, a favorite for me is just covering topics that don't get enough coverage. Eco-anxiety, racism and the modern environmental movement, soil carbon, biomimicry, sustainability in art, conservatism and climate change, green schools. So, these topics that are a bit atypical, but super important, those were definitely favorites for me.
I love the way you categorize those, Scott. I've just got 3 specific moments here that I think are just some of my favorites, on top, of course, of what you're describing. But I thought it was really cool. This was episode 11 on climate change communication. Again, back in the olden days when we would do these episodes and these interviews in person, where we met Ed Maybach at his house outside DC, did the interview there, and then he lives on this beautiful property. So we just walked around, hung out, talked shop. It was really, really cool.
Yeah.
The second, one of my favorite memories, Scott, is our invitation to go share a keynote speech at this U.S. Green Building Council's GreenCon event in central Pennsylvania. This was in 2018. We published the speech on our website. I believe that became episode 31.
Mm-hmm.
But that was really cool. I mean, that's the one and only keynote I've ever given. And it was really cool. I felt like a rock star. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that, Jay, we were like, oh, we're going to get invited to so many keynotes. That didn't quite work, but that's okay. It was so fun to just do that one. And the person that invited us was a committed listener, and it was just cool to meet her and everybody that was involved. And yeah, hopefully we delivered something useful to them. And then win-win, it just became content we could just put on the show.
Totally. And lastly, and this was just kind of more personal for me, Scott, I got to interview Joel McCower in person and see the famous McCower mustache up close. And it is as magical in person as it is over any kind of screen you're looking at, but it was awesome. He's the most humble, coolest guy. Looked up to him for a long time, and it was really, really cool to be able to sit down in a room with him and act like a journalist and say, hey, let's talk about green finance, and just the coolest guy ever. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, I love his like passion for music and such, and just he's got other stuff going on for sure.
Yes.
Which is nice too.
Cool. Well, holy cow, Scott. I mean, this starts to bring us towards the end here. So let's give our last round of thanks to everyone that helps make this possible. First to Taylor Price, who truly behind the scenes is just all muscle here at the show. And I think we would just be having an incredibly difficult time without her. So Taylor, thanks for your help putting together not only, of course, this hodgepodge intro notes, but everything you've done since you've come on. You've been instrumental to the show, and we can't thank you enough.
I have to say, I feel like, Jay, we would have ran out of steam. And so if people enjoyed the past several episodes, particularly the more like traditional ones that involve more research, you have Taylor Price to thank. That those episodes are due to her.
Yes, absolutely. And in the same breath, Scott, we in many ways are listenable because of Keaton Butler, who has been doing our audio editing for years now. And she is quick, she's efficient, she's cool, she's got at least one or two bands that she's in. So Keaton, also huge thanks to you for helping us with, I mean, Scott, remember those early days too, we were doing our own audio editing and it was just brutal because we didn't know what we were doing. I doubt we were using the right software programs. I mean, you know, GarageBand on a Mac can get it done, but is it enjoyable? I'm not sure. But Keaton's been doing it for us for years. And again, Keaton, thank you so much.
And also just dependable, right? So if anyone needs any audio work, you've got to reach out to Keaton. You can Google her and find her. Or if you can't, email us. We'll connect you to her for that. And I love, Jay, how this basically our last episode, and we fumbled so many things. I feel Keaton's like the worst edit job of them all. I'm so sorry, Keaton.
Oh, she's like, thank God.
Yeah,
these
exactly.
guys are out of here.
Tired of these guys.
We also want to thank the Uproot Project and their members, who Scott mentioned recently. We think this is just the coolest partnership that we've been able to really just get started with, and we're hopeful that this continues with the podcast well into the future. They're just a fantastic organization that everyone out there, if they're not already familiar, should absolutely look into.
Okay, so then some thank yous for me. I want to thank my mom for being my number one fan, period, I think. At least longest running number one fan. Maybe Shannon would disagree. But then my mom, I think, is the number one fan of the podcast.
Yep.
I think has been our champion and supporter for a very long time. She helps with some research, of course, but she also takes like my business cards with her, like podcast business cards, like gives them to people that she meets, and she'll be like, "Oh, you need to be on the show," and I'm like, "Oh my God, Mom!" But She's just an inspiration, really, the best, my mom. And I'm glad the podcast gave me some opportunities to work with her some more. And then
Yes.
Square Peg Round Hole, Potions, our music. We've never really, I think the very first episode we had the exact music we've used every time, no?
I think you're right.
It's pretty funny. But it's good. And I really like their stuff, particularly Square Peg Round Hole. Their other tunes, I need to listen to other Potion stuff, but Square Peg Round Hole, it's really good background music for work and stuff.
Nice.
And then maybe most important thanks now. So one is our listeners. You all have stuck with us, and we do the show really for you. I mean, it's fun for us, sure, but really we're just trying to educate and inspire and entertain you all. And Libsyn tells us some people are downloading it, so I guess people are enjoying it. And it enables us to, of course, get sponsorships so we can pay people and do all the things we need to do for the podcast. So you listening allows us to do that. But it just also makes this all worthwhile. So thank you to everyone for listening to the show. And then I want to thank Jay for suggesting we do this in the very first place and being someone that I've enjoyed doing this with so many years.
Scott, of course, I too want to take some time to thank you. And, leading up to recording this, I was like, I'm not really feeling like all that sad about this because I think I know that for better or worse, Scott, you're in my life for good now. Right. So we'll stay connected. We'll be close to the podcast. And this was just a really special first step in our relationships to just really, again, exactly what we're looking for this podcast to do for the next set of hosts, just help them find their journeys through sustainability. So it has been an absolute honor and pleasure. Thank you, Scott.
Back at you, Jay. And, I'm excited for opening my podcast app, seeing a new sustainably defined episode, and not having listened to it.
Yes. Having no idea.
And then you and I will text each other, be like, did you listen to X? I had no idea. And now I'm going to go do this new thing. Or, just be inspired as well.
Love it. And listeners, as far as staying in touch with us, Scott and I are going to stay on top of the hosts at sustainabilitydefined.com email for the next couple months. But I would say in that meantime and after that, please feel free to keep connecting with us on LinkedIn. I know we want to stay connected, and that's going to be the best way to stay in contact with us.
Please do. All right, Jay. I think that about does it. You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen.
I'm Jay Siegel. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, we'll see you at some point.
We'll see you at some point. Do we think we can keep that?